Okay, so now that we have our basic extension loaded in, let's start adding some more interactive elements to our Chrome extension. And a very common interactive element of the Chrome extension is usually the pop-up that appears on the toolbar when you click on the icon of the extension. So if I pin our current extension, you'll notice how currently it's grayed out. And when we click on it, no pop-up appears. And that's because we haven't set that up inside of our manifest file yet. So the way we do that is by implementing something called the action setting. And in order to learn more about the action setting, if we actually head back a page to this extensions documentation, we'll go to the API reference, which documents everything about Chrome extension APIs. And we're going to head over to the action API. And essentially what the action API is that it allows us to control the extensions icon inside of the Google Chrome toolbar. And what Chrome APIs are essentially special JavaScript functions or special manifest file fields that allow us to interact with the Chrome browser through our Chrome extension. And the only way to actually interact with the browser is by using these Chrome APIs. And all of them are denoted with a special Chrome keyword and then dot whatever the name of the Chrome API is. So in order to see this in action, let's begin looking at the manifest file part of the Chrome action API. And you can see it's inside of our JSON object, we have to add in this action field. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create our action object and we'll pass in a default icon. And you can see that it's pretty similar to our current icons field. So let's just copy that over. We'll copy and paste that, and we'll have to adjust the numbers a little bit. So we have 16 by 16. This should be 24 by 24. And we should also have 32 by 32. And again, it'll scale down the icon to fit it to the right size, which is why we can reuse the icon. So the next thing we'll add is the default title field. And we'll make this title slightly different. We'll say timer extension action title. We'll add in a default pop-up field. And here, this is the actual HTML file that will be loaded when you click on the extension. So for now, we'll put in popup.html, and we'll save our manifest file, and we'll create a new file called popup.html. And if you type exclamation mark in VS Code, you'll actually get all of this HTML boilerplate. And most of the stuff inside of this head field doesn't really matter because we're not actually loading this HTML into a regular web page. We're loading it into the pop-up of our extension. But we can fill in the title anyways. It doesn't really matter. But all we'll do for now is add in a h1 to our body, and we'll have it say timer extension. So now that that's done, inside of this extensions tab, what we have to do is actually reload the extension. Anytime you update the manifest file, you will have to reload the extension. So if we refresh it, you can see that this icon now turns blue. And when you hover over it, we can see that default title. And when you click on it, you can see that our timer extension h1 tag has been loaded into the pop-up. So that's awesome. Now that we have our HTML file in there, we can pretty much interact with it like any other HTML web page, meaning that we can add a CSS file and a JavaScript file. So for now, we'll begin with our CSS file. So we'll add in a link tag to our header. It'll be rel style sheet, and the href will be popup.css. And we'll create that new CSS file doing popup.css. And we'll increase the size of the body so that the width is 400 pixels. We'll make the height also 400 pixels, so we have a nice little square. And then for our h1, we may as well set the color to blue, just to give it a bit more color inside of our pop-up. And you'll notice that if we actually open our pop-up, the CSS file has actually already taken effect, and we didn't have to refresh our extension. And you can actually update the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript without ever having to refresh the extension. You only really have to refresh the extension when you update the manifest file, or if you want to do a fresh install for testing purposes. So now that our CSS is working, let's add some JavaScript to spruce up our timer extension a little bit. We're going to add in a new h2 to our body, and I'm going to give this h2 the ID of time. And what I'm planning on doing is using JavaScript to edit the text inside of this h2 to display to the user the current time. Since, this is a timer extension, when they open it, they should be able to see the current clock time. And then we're going to add in a script tag here for our JavaScript. So its source will be popup.js. Then we'll close the tag. We'll create a new file called popup.js. And what we'll need to do, first of all, is get a reference to this time element. So we'll declare a constant, time element, and we'll do document.get elements by ID. And the ID is time. And in order to get the current time, what we have to do in JavaScript is create a new date object and then call the .toLocale time string function. Then all we have to do is do time element.text content is equal to a template string, because what we're going to do is make the text content the time is : and then we're going to pass in the current time. That's this toLocale time string returns a string, and then we can just pass it into the template string. So if we now open our extension, you'll see that the time is now 10:50, which it currently is where I currently am located. And you can see that this is dynamic, so every time you open the extension, it should update with the current time. Although it doesn't update in real time, but we'll implement that feature in an upcoming part. So in order to also demonstrate the JavaScript side of our Chrome Action API, let's check out our developer documentation again. We'll scroll down a bit, and you can see they give you a lot of descriptions about different specific functionality of the Action API, which you can read more about yourself. But if you just want to learn about the different methods that are available on the Action API, they have a really handy shortcut list down here. So let's try out the set badge text function. So you can see that it'll set a badge on the extension icon, and it takes two parameters. It takes a details object and a callback function. And you can see inside of the details object, it takes a tab ID and a text string. So in order to actually use the API, what we'll do is chrome.action.set badge text, and then we'll pass in our details object. And the text for now will say time in all capitals. And then for the callback function, we'll do a console.log finished setting badge text. And we're not going to worry about a tab ID, since for now we want this badge text to be the same regardless of what tab we're on. So if we save this and then we open our pop-up, we can see that our badge text has now been set to time. And if you actually inspect our pop-up, you can see in our console it says finished setting badge text. And inside of this Chrome DevTools console, you can interact with this HTML, JavaScript, and CSS as you would any regular web page. You can directly change the color. For example, I could change this to red. You can modify the text, make it say hello world. But then when you reopen the extension, things get reset. But the Chrome DevTools work the exact same way as on any other web page inside of the pop-up.